noises like ah. And a couple of very quick housekeeping items. We have two new guests today. Lily, stand up, and Hussein. And they are our official disruptors. Oh, they're the police. I'm sorry. I misunderstood. Yeah, yeah. And they're here to bring some fun, yeah? And to keep us from falling into the trance of being talking heads. How's that? Yay! Okay. And the last little housekeeping thing, Meta, I would like to call you up. And I'm speaking as a representative of the Matrix Works facilitation team. And I want to say publicly that your name has come up in so many contexts as being such a positive influence in this community that we wanted to publicly express appreciation to you. People actually were talking about cloning you. I don't know if it's possible, but that was something happening here. And so we want to shine the light of awareness on things that are working, yeah? And so I ask you to come forward and to receive this appreciation. And we have a small gift for you. And please take it out and see if you like it.
Thank you.
It's an earring that is a symbol. I always wear it, and it's the knot of endless love. And I suspect that part of what you're bringing is a quality of love and care to what you do. So another round of applause. Huh? And we'll save a couple of things for later, and I'd like to turn it to you. Oh, sorry, to Greg.
Just thinking about how to introduce these folks. There's just a little background. There's this crazy Armenian back 150 years ago or so, G.I. Gurdjieff, who was also looking into weird and interesting technologies for coordination. Coordination of the self and the self. And he had a lot of people, he worked with a lot of people who influenced the world. Frank Lloyd Wright worked inside the Gurdjieff tradition. John Cleese worked inside the Gurdjieff tradition. Actually, if you go and start looking at probably some of your favorite artists and movers and shakers, you'll find an enormous percentage of them have actually worked inside the Gurdjieff tradition. And one of them that I worked with was Robert Fripp, and he started the whole guitar circle stuff, which you'll see a demonstration of. Officially Guitarcraft and Guitar Circle is complete, it's done, but we're continuing the work ourselves. So I need to acknowledge that. But Robert worked with J.G. Bennett, who worked with Gurdjieff directly. And Tony, who you'll see in a minute, worked directly with JGB. And he has taken some of JGB's ideas quite a bit further in terms of how they apply to sustainable organizations. And I got to know Adrian and Ian through Tony and Tony's work on the Cosmic Ecology. And I think you'll find them to be, in the words of Gurdjieff, remarkable people.
Well, so to start off, I just want to say that this is a total pleasure to be here. Absolutely wonderful to walk down the street and be able to smell flowers. Okay, like for those of us that live in Canada or other places that are experiencing a lot of snow, which is also parts of the States, it's just unbelievable to experience this beauty that's here in Seattle, and as well as I feel like that reflects the beauty that's in this room as well. So Greg just mentioned that we've been doing work from the tradition of Gurdjieff, who I heard some clapping, so there sounds like there's some familiarity. Just a little bit of a sense of what that is that it looks at geometry and numbers from a qualitative perspective, and what this can actually inform us about our transformations inside of ourselves, as well as in groups or in society as a whole. And so H3 Uni, which is the organization we're here with, it stands for Towards a University of the Third Horizon. Typically, like on our website, you're not going to see any of this stuff. This was actually not really intended to be shared so publicly, mainly because we're working in the space of corporates and everything else. And so this is more of our background thinking. So we're letting you in a little bit into that today, and it's part of it is really an invitation that if there's something that sparks, even if it's just one thing, blockchain, we are incredibly interested in this room and in the ideas and the philosophy and the values that underpin blockchain. And we would love to see if there's any potential for collaboration. So, yesterday, Vlad, in the opening remarks, was talking about the need to think about those who are not in the room today. Right? And often when we think about that, we think about stakeholders, we think about people, right? So, and even that sometimes is stretching our mind to think about people in another part of the world, or people in different socioeconomic status, or those kinds of differences. And I'm not going to say much more about that until a little bit after you have a chance to talk to each other. So one thing is that, to share something a little bit personal about myself, is that I am pregnant. I wasn't planning on saying anything, but I am. And a few weeks ago, someone asked me, when I was trying to decide what I was going to focus on and how I was going to make decisions, because my life's about to change radically. So what am I going to say yes to and what am I going to say no to? Because I need to start saying no to a lot more things. She said, who are you responsible to? And what was beautiful was what first came up was this strong, intense feeling about the future. And it wasn't any one person, any one perspective from the future. It was the future, that somehow I am responsible to the future and making a better future. Now, that means something different to every single person in this room, right? So just take a moment, and in your groups of, you probably have at your tables, groups of 2s or 3s, just turn to the one person beside you or the few people around you and talk about who are you responsible to? What does this mean for you? What kind of future do you want to bring into this world? What is not part of that future, right? Like, is there something that you want to see less of in this world? Okay, so you'll have about a minute each to speak, and I'll just kind of make a little sound into the microphone when it's time to switch. You might want to switch again. Has everyone had a chance to speak? Raise your hand if you're still waiting to speak. Okay, so yeah, some people are going full table. Go for it. So we're going to come back into this room, and I don't know where Ian's going, but he can't get away from me that easily. Great. So just a few reflections from the room. I'll say it back into the microphone, but can we just hear from maybe two people if there are any themes from a table? Just raise your hand.
Yeah, we all kind of said the same thing in different ways, but there is really a thing of the sense of responsibility to the larger self versus the individual self, and being a witness to that process, and how it plays out in us.
Beautiful, thank you. Okay, just from one other table. You want to hear? I saw your hand hesitating. You were pointing at someone else, but here you go.
So the theme from this table was responsibility to the individual self, in that you have to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. So first and foremost, mind, body, spirit of the self, and then go from there.
It's really interesting, isn't it? About this inner looking outer, and then outer looking inner, and taking care of both, and how it's a balance between both. Thank you. So Ian's going to say a few words. Ian Kendrick here is a colleague at H3 Uni, and is kind of if you're into music, if you're into, well, obviously everyone here is into IT, community stuff, just go find this man and track him down later. He's fun.
Morning. Am I audible okay? Yeah, good. Okay. The reason I'm going to stand up, first of all, is to say hello. I'll be on the table over there for most of the morning, doing stuff which will become clear as the morning goes by. The specific reason for talking to you right now is to introduce Tony, to give some context to Tony. Now, Greg introduced Tony in terms of the linkage between Gurdjieff, Bennett, and then Tony and Robert Fripp and so on and so forth. But I met Tony just about 25 years ago now. And I was working in IT, in strategy for IT companies. And I was given the job of figuring out the future of IT in 1996, okay? And I was given a big budget and a big team, and I didn't have a clue what to do because I sat home one night and said, well, if these things interact that way, it'll go that way. But if they interact this way, it'll go that way. And if they interact that way, it'll go that way. And I just got a headache and thought, I can't do this. And the next morning, there's a particular word in this which I think might resonate with this community. There was an email waiting for me on my desk saying, trying to figure out multiple possible futures? Can't do it? Question mark. No, really. Really, it did, okay? And I was like, whoa, where did that come from, okay? And it was a 2-day program on strategic thinking using scenarios. I know the word scenario has some resonance with this group, as does the word resonance, okay? Pick that up so far, okay? So I was at a conference in Amsterdam and I had to fly in, and I was the guy late, coming through the door in the middle of winter with a bunch of suitcases and a hat on to try and keep myself warm. And there was a guy sat there, and I went, you look interesting. And that was Tony. 2 weeks later, I hired him as a consultant for my team. And we did a set of strategic scenarios for the future of IT and where would it lead. It took 9 months, 30 people. It was a big job. And what came out of that, which we weren't looking for, was the emergence of online communities, which are now very well understood. It predicted eBay, it predicted Amazon, it predicted Kickstarter, and it predicted all of those on Facebook, by the way, in that order. And there was one step that came after that, and I tracked it for the last 20 years. I tracked the emergence of these communities because we got to understand the underpinning dimensions that were causing this to happen 20 years ago. The last step was something that we called ethos cohered communities. That is a community that is not geared around money. It's not geared around sex. It's not geared around religion. It's not geared around commerce. It's not geared around politics. It's cohered through something else of a higher nature, ethos, the underpinning values that guide our judgment and our direction and our actions. And it never happened. And then it did, okay? It did start to happen, and we saw it. If you're looking for something, you'll see them emerging, okay? And the blockchain community is an example of that, as are music communities, okay, which Adrian mentioned about music communities. I won't go into that for details right now. Throughout that journey of those 20-odd years, I've worked with Tony, and what has become clearer and clearer and clearer is that Tony actually accesses wisdoms from all sorts of different places, from different epochs and different directions. And that's what guides what we're doing in H3 Uni. And I didn't realize it at the time, 25 years ago, but that's what was guiding strategic thinking about futures. So it's quite a big build-up for Tony, but we've got half an hour with Tony, but he's just going to split the talk into 3 sessions. Okay, I'm just going to leave it at that, but over to Tony.
Well, hello. Perhaps, Ian, you could just let me know if I'm coming through okay.
On, but yes, we can hear you just fine.
Excellent. I'm very happy to be with you virtually and in spirit, actually. It's been great to just get a little feel looking at the room through the narrow lens of the camera. I want to share with you in this session the first glimpse of a new emerging field that I like to call Cosmic Ecology. You'll see why, hopefully, by the end of my talk. So my task is to open this up with a few key ideas. It's a rather large topic for about 30 minutes, so we're going to take a kind of high-level overview, but I hope you'll find some fresh and useful perspectives from it in your own lives and your own work. Now, we begin with the idea that we're actually in a bit of a global crisis. The exponential growth that defines the Anthropocene age is leading to an overshoot, currently by about 5 months, according to people who study this. And I believe this is caused by a mismatch of our worldviews with reality. We treat our partial knowledge as absolute, and this leads to a pathology of worldviews in every culture. So it's useful to do a bit of systems thinking about this. So here's a loop. How we see the world affects how we act. How we act affects the way the world reacts. And the way the world reacts, if we're out of line with it, leads to dire consequences. And one of the peculiar things about us humans is we're really very bad at taking the feedback and learning. As we say, history repeats itself, financial crises repeat themselves, and so on. Political mayhem repeats itself. So what this is about is that we need to develop a reflective intelligence that's looking at things differently. So I'm going to go into this a little bit more. But here we are hitting planetary limits. Those of you that might follow the Stockholm Resilience Centre will know about the idea of a safe operating space for humanity. And we've largely got there, in my view, through having probably 3,000 years or more of domination and exploitation of the planet upon which we live. But in my lifetime, which is getting rather long, I'm afraid, we have been discovering terrestrial ecology. And in that context, we're realizing that the survival of humanity is at stake. So is that sufficient? Well, this picture that I'm going to share with you says, no, we need to push it further and discover a cosmic ecology where we've got a much stronger sense of meaning and purpose that's deeper than mere survival. Now, if we put the word cosmic in front of ecology, we're obviously looking at the big picture about the nature of the universe, and the largely accepted official view, particularly in Western cultures these days, is that it all started with a big bang. I believe there's even a popular television series under that name. However, supposing that actually we draw on other cosmologies from other less popular or distributed cultures that say that actually the universe arises from mind, in which case, instead of a big bang, we'd have a big shout, let it be, and something would happen. Now, if we take it that mind is a major factor in our universe, then we also have to look at the challenging thought that the universe is inherently intelligent. Now, by intelligent here, I'm stretching that word way beyond what seems to happen in brains, whether they're animal or human, but to something much more fundamental about the nature of things. But unfortunately, to do that, there's a challenge which we have to get around. This challenge is that pathological worldviews block us from discovering that area. These blockages create a forbidden zone, a don't go there. So I'd like to take one version of that and just walk you around some of the things that box us in our culture and make it difficult to explore the kinds of questions that we're going to bring up here. So here's the don't go zone. One dominant idea in our society is that matter is dumb. So obviously, if you start claiming that matter isn't dumb, you're in the forbidden zone. Another one is that only brain is intelligent. But supposing intelligence is a much more distributed function among many levels in the universe, not just what we experience as human beings in human bodies. We also like to claim that human brains are the most intelligent. We're at the summit of evolution and creation. And indeed, for quite some time, we're considered to be the only species in the entire universe. Challenging that is often getting you into the forbidden zone. Similarly, we look at the Earth and the biosphere and life on Earth. And since the Earth and biosphere are not brain, we act as if they're dumb and we exploit them. And of course, there's all that stuff out there revealed by the Hubble telescope and beyond. And of course, that's not brain, so the universe out there is dumb. And of course, humans are the only not dumb thing in the universe. So the idea of alien life, although slightly more popular and certainly science fiction, is still pretty undiscussable. So what we need to do is switch that forbidden zone into a cosmic portal and do a bit of flipping and do the dangerous thing. So let's start with the idea that matter is intelligent and intelligence is matter. As Gurdjieff said, pretty much everything has a form of intelligence. I'm getting a back channel communication here. Okay, it seems that we've lost the share screen. Okay. So what I'm going to do is to stop sharing, reverse a bit, and try again. See if the internet will support us here. It looks to me as if you've got my screen back again. Okay. Wow, this is fun. We need telepathy beyond in the internet, don't we? So I'm not sure where this broke off, but I'm going to quickly run through the idea of the barriers that matter is dumb, that only the brain is intelligent, that human brains are the most intelligent, that Earth and biosphere are dumb, all stuff out there is dumb, and we're the only species which is not dumb. So how do we open the cosmic portal where we can get into the forbidden zone and explore. So here we go. Let's take it that matter is intelligent, and intelligence is matter. As I said, Gurdjieff said that pretty much everything has a form of intelligence. Let's look at the idea that intelligence is prior to the brain. Instead of being an epiphenomena of the brain, it is intelligence that configures the brain or the brains of creatures right throughout the universe. That currently, despite our hubris and egoism, human intelligence is currently rather cosmically primitive. Let's consider that Earth and its biosphere are cosmically intelligent. We, of course, have views of this kind in indigenous cultures, but we've not brought that into the mainstream. And let's suppose that the stuff out there that we can see with our telescopes and other devices is simply a surface manifestation of a hidden intelligence that is actually out there. And let's be optimistic and say maybe we have a role potentially to become cosmically intelligent as part of our evolutionary process. So by flipping around the barriers that create a forbidden zone, we enter a portal and we can begin to entertain alternative worldviews, see what new questions, learning and meaning they bring. And so as not to burden you with overly death by PowerPoint, we're now going to take a short break for you to just have a little buzz conversation about this. So I'll hand you over to Ian and Adrian for not more than 5 minutes, just so that you can see what you made of my first part of my talk. So see you soon.
Great. Thanks, Tony. Okay, wow, that's loud. Okay, so at your tables, you'll see that there are 3 packages of sticky notes. If you take the green one, we'll start with green. And what we're going to do for the next 5 minutes is that we're going to have questions for Tony. Okay, so hold on a moment. Just move your chairs after if you could. We're going to be, gather the questions that you have on what he just talked about. They could be questions of clarification, like I didn't quite understand what you meant by this, or it could be a question about relationship. Well, how does this relate to music or artificial intelligence, whatever it is. And what we're going to be doing is at the end of, he's going to have 3 talking parts, and we're going to gather these questions. And we're going to demonstrate a process that we use on collective patterning. Usually we use hexagons. Tony's actually the creator of the hexagon approach from the 70s. Some of you might be familiar with that. And we're going to be showing this patterning back to you tomorrow at 12. And normally this is something that this community could actually use collectively in real time to pattern together. Unfortunately, time and space restrictions, we can't do that. So to start off, just write your questions if you have any questions. It could be 1 question at your table, it could be 5 questions, but if you do have more than 1, just make sure to prioritize it. So write, circle a number 1 so that we can really make sure that we try to get that question answered. Okay, thank you. And I'll come around and start collecting those, and Tony will start on the next section. So if you have any questions, I'll just come pick them up. Okay. So I'm collecting these, and Tony, you can start the next section.
Okay, well, the second part, we're going to look at the idea of seeing the universe as being. One of my teachers as a young man was Professor David Bohm, and he led me to the idea of the universe as a qualitative infinity, not simply a quantitative infinity. And qualities are the primary distinctions that enable us to discern one level of being from another. So they're about qualities of organization and transformation. So we're going to do a grand tour of the universe in 12 levels of being in half as many minutes. So hold on to your seats. Here they come, beginning from the universal field through complexes of fundamental particles right up to the unfathomable totality. No doubt you'll be asking me why 12, and that would be a lecture in itself. But a curious thought I came across was some research by some Paris scientists in Paris who'd done a lot of mathematical calculations around the background radiation of the Big Bang. And from the patterns they discerned there, they came to the conclusion that the universe might be a dodecahedron. So that's an interesting little thought there to chew on. But just going through them a little bit more fully, the universal field, of course, these days is also the world of dark energy and dark matter. And the stuff that we're aware of is a very small proportion. But that basic base of the universe, if you like, enables the whole of the rest of it to come into being. Then there are fundamental complexes. When I was at school, we had three particles: electrons, protons, and neutrons. Now there's something well over 200. And people are trying to figure out the patterning. This is a Lie 8 set, which I don't understand the maths, but it's one of the ways people are trying to relate the maths to the observations and empirical evidence. Then we move on to elemental structures, where we get the more familiar world of chemistry. And what's amazing here is that out of just 4 elements, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, the huge infrastructure of life is created. I have a colleague who's researching that our infrastructure should be almost entirely composed of chon, and then it would be sustainable and resilient. Then we move up to the layer of the soil and the ocean, where the interface between what we would normally call dead matter and live matter, very important layer. If we destroy the soil and the ocean, we destroy life. And then we move to the, I called it phytovegetation rather than just plants, because I want to emphasize that if you look at the earth in terms of energy transformation of light by chlorophyll, you get a vast surface area of energy transformations going on the surface of the planet. Then the next level is a bit tricky to visualize, but it's distinctively the area where reproduction in its diverse sense, that is to say, where sex comes into it and genetic structures of genetics and epigenetics play their part. And then we move on to the layer of anemoids. I could have put animals there, but I wanted to emphasize that animals may exist on other planets, in other galaxies, around other solar systems. And just as we call this diversity animals here, we may want to call them anemoids, just as we call humanoids, because we like our science fiction of other creatures, which may be, as Gurdjieff pointed out, rather more real than just science fiction. Then, of course, we have the huge diversity of human beings on the planet. And then we take a rather difficult leap. And I'm hoping that some of you may have seen Tarkovsky's movie Solaris, where we actually have an intelligent planet that's giving a lot of headaches and difficulties to the hapless humans who are orbiting it on their space station. So the idea that intelligence now is a property of these elements of the solar system is a big leap, as is the leap that actually there's another level of intelligence that actually creates solar systems, which we take in our conventional sciences mechanistic, but is it really? And then we can move to the idea of galactic intelligence, which is where we have vast structures with huge diversity that, and we find that there are billions of them in the entire known universe. And then what does it all add up to? Well, there's the unfathomable totality, which I've here represented by a picture, a simulation of the background radiation, which in a way loops us back to where we began. So although I've presented this to you as a rapid tour of 12 levels, this is only one lens through which to view the universe. There are other views which are circular. Here we have the Far Eastern Ouroboros, a dragon eating its tail. You'll have probably come across the serpent. And of course, reality is also circular and systemic. So as well as the levels, we can picture them coupled together in complex systems at complex levels. So I'll leave you with the picture of the fiery dragon eating its tail and invite you to another little 5-minute buzz around your tables, where hopefully you can now, having gained permission to enter the portal, you can really get inside it and start seeing what you find there.
Thank you, Tony. Okay, so this time there are some yellow sticky notes. And if you could write the questions or any thoughts that you might have on those. And if you can, just try to write one thought or question per sticky note. Since we're running a little bit behind on time this morning. This one we're going to close down a little bit sooner. So if you could just get those ideas out in the next minute, that'd be great. And just raise your hand if you have them ready. Great, so I'm coming around for the last time. Thank you. Okay, so this time, before Tony starts, there's a lot of talk in the room, and sometimes when there's someone on a screen, not in the room, it's a little bit harder to be present, right? So just take a moment and get into your body, stretch, take a deep breath, come back. That silence sounds so nice. Okay. So we're just going to have a moment of silence. Just coming back into this room. So if your mouth is open, just quietly close the mouth. Yes. Thank you. Okay. Tony, we're ready to go.
Okay, so having set some background, we now need to get at the gist of this cosmic ecology. There are 8 cosmoses within the universe. They form the universe as a system. So the next step is to consider how these 12 levels interrelate. Oh, sorry, I was just picking up a back channel message there, distracted me. This will enable us to define these multiple cosmoses within the whole universe. So we can go back to our Ouroboros and just look at it simply as each oval here is a cosmos in which a key energy transformation takes place. Transformation means just that it's a cosmic alchemy changing one quality into another. Now, we're using the term energy, and it's important to realize that the old-fashioned definition in school physics is still a pretty good one, that energy is the power to do work. But the nature of that work, of course, can be qualitatively very different. So for each of these levels that I outlined previously, there's a quality of energy. Now, to go through all of these in depth is out of range of such a short talk. And also there's another limitation, that our language is very poorly furnished with words that can actually describe the qualities. but treat this as a first kind of quick tour to get the idea of a shift of quality. So we have the 0 point energy, which is a huge, vast source of energy, albeit only accessible in tiny amounts so far. We have the patterning energy of multiple patterns of fundamental particles interacting and containing each other. We have the cohesive energy that is created around the world of molecules and crystals. We have the adaptive energy, which enables an interface between the material substrate of the planet and the living processes. We have our constructive energy that is able to transform light, carbon dioxide, and water into sugars and provide the basis of metabolism for life. We have the germ cells that enable the evolution of organisms and their adaptation to different habitats and circumstances. We have the diversifying energy in the animal kingdom of characteristics and even idiosyncrasies, I like to call them, the character elements, which, for example, in Sufi psychology are part of the characterizations of as different humans. And then we've got the sensitive energy, the energy of perception, which is we normally experience as awareness. But then there's another level, which is the conscious energy of self-remembering, of actually being aware that we're aware, which is less common. And then we have the access to creative energy, where spontaneous arisings occur. We experience obviously through our minds as possible ideas and insights. And then we have the unitive energy of love, of universal love and compassion, which we put at the galactic level. And then we have a transcendent energy where the best word we can come up with is transcendent, because it's way out of reach, even though we live and have our being within it. So how does that transformation work? Well, we have to think, first of all, of 3 levels and a triad, a threefold system, which is the kind of core engine of what we're going to call a cosmos. So here are 3 distinct qualities, and the transformation or the alchemy works by the higher operating on the lower to create the middle. So that's the core engine of a cosmos. And if we're looking at the human cosmos, then the core of that is the conscious energy of self-remembering. The creative energy, if we're open to it, acts on our perceptions and sensitivities and wakes us up so that we're actually present to see more clearly and reflectively what's going on both inside and outside of us. But the cosmos alone requires a context. So here we have our 3 levels, and this is the internal cosmos system. Then we have 2 levels above, one below, and we have the cosmos boundary, and that means we have 2 other components, one above, one below, and all of these 5 link together into a 5-fold system of transformation. And that becomes the fundamental energy of the cosmos. Gurdjieff would say in his early talks in Moscow, all knowledge begins from knowledge of the cosmoses. So how does that relate to our transformation? Well, a cosmos serves something higher than itself. It draws on another level to serve it or feed it. It has a higher quality and a base quality. And because it's a 5-fold system, we use the old alchemical term quintessence, that the deep significance of that particular cosmic system. So if we're looking at the human level, conscious energy is working with creative energy and sensitive energy. but also it's serving the unitive energy, and it's feeding off the diversifying energy. So this was really the principle that Gurdjieff summed up as eating and being eaten, the basic metabolism. So how do these different cosmoses correlate and intertwine with each other? Well, here we do a little bit of geometry. Here's a cosmos, and here's another one, which is up one level. And we can see that um, joining them, that the higher nature of this cosmos becomes the central nature of the next cosmos, and everything sort of moves up a notch. And so this now gives us the clue as to how 12 levels relate to 8 cosmoses. So here are the 12 energies, and here's what I call the crystalline cosmos, which is centered 3 levels up, the sustaining cosmos, next level, the phytogenic cosmos, the fertile cosmos, the anemoid cosmos, the humanoid cosmos, the generative cosmos, and the undivided cosmos. So here we see how 5 into 12 goes 8, which is an interesting non-conventional arithmetic. But this shows a structure of systems. To explain, of course, is probably a few years of study, but at least I can give you a little hint here, which I'm sure you'll be relating to other studies that you've made of other schemes of this kind. So to sum up this particular pattern, because I think the key thing I want to communicate is the pattern, the deeper meaning will come later, is 12 levels of being, 12 corresponding qualities of energy, a threefold transformation at the core, a fivefold cosmic ecology, which puts things in context and in relation to each other, and 8 cosmoses make up the whole universe. So one of the things I studied in my 20s very deeply with John Bennett was the whole idea of the qualitative significance of number, which is a very different kind of systems thinking, something I could not officially put in my doctoral thesis on systems science, but which maybe will get written up long. And so there we are, the 8 cosmoses in the circular and multi-leveled universe. Now we're going straight on to part 4, which is, so what on earth does this mean? I've taken a version of Gurdjieff's prime destiny question, what is the meaning of life in the universe and of human life in particular? Well, here the cosmoses can help us get a bearing on this, because basically at our stage of evolution, social organization and politics and you name it, we're still often in the basic psychology of the way we behave, centered more in the animal cosmos. And so we're operating at a much lower level than our true potential. But nevertheless, in operating that way, we're serving a cosmic purpose. But we have the possibility of serving consciously at a higher level, where the whole energy transformation moves up a complete level. We can sum this up in more familiar terms by looking at the idea of an unregenerative humanity and a generative humanity. An unregenerative humanity tends to have a false belief in human superiority in the universe, is very much under the dominion over nature belief system, tends to be dissociated from nature and the universe, and doesn't see itself as part of the web of life, privileges reductionist science or dogmatic religion as the only explanations in town, and economically particularly sees growth as the absolute norm, as if we lived on a flat Earth, whereas generative humanity acknowledges it has barely started conscious evolution. It sees its ethos as stewardship of nature, not exploitation. Humans are participants in nature and a reflection of the universe, as above, so below, that conscious science is being developed with additional ways of knowing, and transformation is a relative norm on a spherical planet with a quite different kind of economy. So in summary, you can join the limitless growth as the pathological norm club. We see where that's going on the planet, and we can join transformations as the new organic norm. So I believe this brings it full circle to the question that Ian brought up in his introduction about the ethos of communities. And I'm sure from what I've learned from Greg and even just a little acquaintance through some of your observations earlier this morning, that you are definitely for the right-hand column here, but it may be that seeing this in the context of a wider cosmology is also part of the circle of inner work, because it is the inner work of how we see the world which will affect how we act, which will show as the world reacting, hopefully with better consequences, which will complete the learning loop, which we can enhance by self-development. So that's my serpent eating its tail in this talk. And I hope that having to do this without being able to be present in the room with you has still given you a flavor of you being here and me being there. But to give you a chance for a little more digestion, before I respond to some of your questions and try and help make better sense of them, I'm handing you back over to Adrian and Ian for a final sort of quick table conversation.
Thank you, Tony. Okay, so there's one more, I think it's red sticky notes or pink sticky notes on your table. And in a moment after you write down your questions, we're actually inviting Lily and Hussein up to shake the energy up in the room a little bit.
Can I just lay out where we're up to in terms of process for this? So what's going to happen is we're going to get the questions from you now. Over on this table, we've got all the questions from everybody. We've selected 3 questions from each of the sessions. Tony now has the first 2. At the end of this session, we'll send 3 more to Tony. Tony will then spend 15 minutes with us going through answers to those questions, so directly addressing. And tomorrow at lunchtime, what we're going to do is feed back to you all the questions that you've asked, and we'll pattern them so we can see how this group is actually reacting to what we've just heard. So you see the whole pattern for the whole group. Okay? Thanks.
So about another minute. I'm just coming around. Okay. Hold up your sticky note if you have something ready. So raise your hand if you have anything else for me to come pick up, and I'll come pick them up. Okay. And that's a nice flying machine. Okay, so here we have Lily and Hussein, and they're going to be leading us in something mysterious. I'm not sure what.
We're not either. Okay, everybody stand up. Like, just stand up. Thank you. Everybody. Yep. And then grab a partner. It can be at your table or anywhere. Just please pair off. Somebody you can push over. Okay, stand facing your partner like such. What? Yeah. All right. Everybody quiet down if you can hear what I'm saying. Thank you. So we're going to play a short game with the body. Maybe let your brain rest for a second and rely on the intelligence in your body. There's two versions. We'll show you this version first. So you stand on one leg, face your partner, and you're trying to push them over. You can only, are we doing hands only? You can only touch their hand, and you can push against them, but they're allowed to give. Yeah. You can also do it with two hands. I'm going to put the mic down for a second. So before you start, I know it's very, very exciting to get to push someone over. But I want to show you the two-footed version if you're wearing heels or just don't like standing on one foot. It's the same. All right, so play a couple rounds of that, have some fun, and then we'll return. So these people in the middle, why are we not playing? You don't want to? You want to play with me? Do you want to play with me? Yeah? Okay.
Everyone find a new partner so that you have a different challenge. So walk around the room and find a new partner and play them. Okay. We are going to come back together for 1 second. Staying within our bodies, we're just going to try to walk around the room for 2 to 3 minutes. I want you to try to connect to someone in the room who you don't know and just speak one word from the last hour that resonated with you, right? Just something that resonated with you, maybe why it did as a mode of introduction, and just brief introductions primarily focused on moving our bodies through the space. Go.
So welcome back. Here, can you do something for me? Clap your hands if you can hear this. Clap your hand twice if you can hear this. Clap your hands twice, 3 times if you can hear me. Okay. Clap your hands 10 times really fast if you can hear me. And close your mouth. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so let's just hear from a few people about what came up. And if other people could just not speak while that's happening, that'd be wonderful. Okay, so I think your name's Peter. Okay, so here.
Hello, everyone on the opposite side of the room that's still talking. Hello. I just said something to, where's your name again? I just said something to Adrian. She asked me to share it. That I said I felt like this whole thing was very helpful because it's putting a structure of thought and language and words to something I already believe in, and it's especially important because of that one of the last slides that showed the kind of 2 paradigms that are existing at the same time, and that one of the things I find very challenging is that my thinking is already on the generative or regenerative side. And I'm doing an enterprise that's trying to bring people from the old paradigm into the new paradigm. And it's very difficult work. And I feel like that's a lot of what RChain and blockchain itself is also doing, is trying to bring an old world paradigm into a new. And to have this visualization that we've had and the language to it is very super helpful for me.
Great, thank you. Now, I'm just wondering, is there anyone else who'd like to share? Now, it doesn't have to be like, all Care Bears in here. There could also be things like, I didn't quite understand something, or if there was something that really resonated with you, just love to hear about it. So just right there.
So I do want to say, if you're not into this, if this makes no sense, if this is like, what are these hippies doing? That's okay too. You don't have to be, you're still a part, whether you think it's important or not, whether you understand or not, we're all still a part of this together. If that makes sense. Thanks.
Anyone else want to speak? Just raise your hand.
To Kenny's point, I guess I felt a longing. I wish more of the dev team, which are out in the hallway, were in here. I'm glad that Aitan is here. For me, it's always about trying to make challenging ideas like this actionable, practical. When I introduced the Tai Chi yesterday, I began with, bring part of our attention to what's to the left of us and what's to the right of us. And it's incredibly practical. Why? Because we were squashed into this tiny space. It also has farther reaching implications and repercussions, but just this really, really practical thing of where am I in relation to Alex? And where am I in relation to Heidi? Right? And where am I in relationship to the table? These kinds of things are very practical. So sometimes I know for me it can feel woo-woo or weird, but it ends up being very practical for me. And I think part of what makes RChain practical is our development work. So anyway.
Great. So is there anyone else who just wants to speak from a different perspective? Or from furthering that perspective on? I know that some people ask questions like, how is this actually practical? And I think the challenge with this request to come and share on this deeper level without actually having the time, space, for us to actually get into how we take this. We take these practices and we apply them very practically. We're doing it with the Sustainable Development Goals Transformation Forum. That's like super high leverage networks around the world, figuring out climate change. We're also doing it with Facing the Future, or sorry, wrong name, but Future Stewards, and once again, it's Fortune 500 companies, other things. This is the background thinking that helps us create models that can actually, so for you, it'd be like, well, your protocols, right? If your protocols are going to be determining future decisions. I don't know the answer of how this applies, but I'm seeing some nodding of heads. Maybe this does. So it's just a question, and I just want to check with Ian if Tony's ready. Okay, great. So I'm wondering, from this room right now, are there any burning questions? I'm going to put Tony on the spot and actually ask him to answer the most burning question from this room that he did not choose. So put your hand up if you have a burning question. Okay. And before that, Tony, can you hear us? Tony, just say that you can hear us if you're there.
I can hear you, and I'm ready to go. I've just got a slight wobble on one of my cameras, so I'm hoping it doesn't affect the share screen, which I'm about to start.
Okay, so for this question, you can either stay standing, because we've been sitting all morning, so it kind of feels nice to be standing, or you can sit down in a chair close to you. So here we go. What's your name?
Hi, my name is Tim. And I think, Tony, you can see me in this camera, so I just turn around. Thanks for the presentation, and I assume that it took a while to build up that model. I'm really interested if you can point out a path or direction, how it is possible to study more in that direction to actually derive to that point. Yeah, that's my question.
So Tony right now, what he's doing, he's sharing on the screen. I'll just speak while he's typing because I don't think that's...
Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can. So this is
Oh,
hexagons.
great. Well, I can start then. No, it's fine. No need to do any padding. So this is a sample, obviously, of a lot more questions that are going on in your minds. And I put them on these hexagons just in the order that they happen to be thrown at me. And so I've just got a few minutes now to play with them and try and respond to the things that are coming up in your minds. I think this is interestingly connected with that one. I think it's important to connect the dealing with intelligence. That's probably got some association there. Radical jump in levels might be something to do with this, and universal law would be perhaps more connected with the idea of levels. And I think that one probably stands on its own. Let me talk about this cluster here. One of the intriguing things about intelligence is its relationship to uncertainty. And if there was no uncertainty in the universe, there wouldn't be any need for intelligence. The universe would be one big algorithm, and there'd certainly be no room for free will.
Tony?
So the idea
Tony,
that...
sorry to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt. You're using a window that's too big for our screen. Can you zoom out, please? Or just move around so that whatever you're talking about is in the center.
Hang on a minute.
Oh, that's great. Thanks.
Okay, I don't know whether I can... The question now is if I make these smaller, at what point do they lose their readability? Are those still readable?
Yep, people are saying it's fine.
Okay, so so the idea of intelligence, as we treat it, is that it's that additional factor that we need to navigate uncertainty, where we can't make predictions and we can't necessarily rely on past experience. But if there wasn't that hazard, as Bennett called it, he called his great work the dramatic universe. If there wasn't that hazard, there'd be no room to maneuver for intelligence. So those of you who have an entrepreneurial mind will know that if everything was certain, there wouldn't be any entrepreneurial space. That part of the challenge is you come up with stuff that wasn't there before, whether it's to meet an unmet need or whatever. And that's where you have the, as it were, the wiggle room to be creative and to create something new. And so extrapolate that to the universe as a whole is an interesting thought. Pick up this one about life being circular. Of course, my introducing the Ouroboros, the serpent or the snake that eats its tail, is a stepping stone, because actually we need to go from the circle to the spiral, which is more complex. And so what goes around comes around may be true if we're stuck in a level, but the whole idea of the regenerative approach is that you go around the loop at a more refined level next time. And so there is a conscious evolutionary spiral. And some of the circularity is actually built into even into the astronomy, that the solar system goes around the center of the galaxy and it oscillates in and out on its distance from the center, and that affects the whole energy of the solar system. Maybe I could relate this one here, because the glib answer to why 12 levels is, well, why not? In which case, why not have 13 or 5 or 72? Well, there are two ways into this. One is actually looking at the evolution of our understanding of things, which probably you could take back to, for example, to the Platonic solids, that there is some sort of relationship of geometry and number, and Pythagoras, for example, to the nature of things. And Bucky Fuller built on that in developing his approach, which ended up as one product as the geodesic dome. In terms of the old alchemical teachings, certainly Gurdjieff and Bennett drew on those teachings because they felt that they were being overlooked by the heavy quantitative reductionist view of modern science, and there were values in those qualitative structures that we shouldn't lose. That's a whole study in itself. And I guess what I'll put that there. What we should take away from this session: can we make a radical jump in levels? Well, I think the interesting thing is that if we are inclined to take a practical interest in our own self-transformation, inner development, enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, in whatever teaching and tradition, that it has a cosmic connection that may have implications much vaster than the simple, human personal level. That may be serving a higher purpose than just being good and nice to people or compassionate. And one picture of this in recent literature is, of course, the eagle's gift of Castaneda, that the awareness is fed to the eagle, which is the unregenerate level, but there is the possibility of dashing past the eagle to be free. and that is the quest for the next level. So what you should take away, I don't know whether the word should, I just picked that up from the note I was given. What you might take away from this session is that the understanding of yourself requires an understanding of the universe, and a proper understanding of the universe requires an understanding of yourself. And if you can combine these two things together, then you may find that your development progresses at a faster rate. To find more study and direction is an interesting challenge. I'm not sure. My research has been very individualized with a few collaborations, but in a way, given the appalling pathological state of most of our worldviews, we really need a new school of cosmic ecology. And by that, I don't mean the version I've given you today, but this is an example of a whole research field that should be developed. I don't know whether that's enough. I'll look back at the camera now to give you something more to chew on, and I'll try and stop this beeping. Okay, so over to you, Ian and Adrian and Greg, and thank you very much for what must be a very difficult situation to pay proper attention, just as it is difficult for me to project my presence into the room. But I hope enough of that has happened that you can take away some useful ideas, insights, or questions for future application.
Thank you, Tony. Okay, let's just give all a round of applause for Tony. So tomorrow at lunch, we're going to touch back in, and we might do some more on the hexagons, or we might touch on an application. We'll see what we end up doing. So that's tomorrow at lunch. And I was just wondering, how much time do we have for a break? How many lightning talks do we have now? 8. Great. Okay, so 5 minutes, and then we're back.
I'm the first lightning talk. Okay, get plugged in, please. Plugged in. This is the wire. Mic check. Okay. know when the break started? Right. Yep.
So make sure that.
And I'm going to warm up the audience for you.
Check, check, check.
Check. Okay. Lightning talk in about 1 minute here. This is going to be really cool. You're going to want to find your seats. We got a series of lightning talks. Each one's going to be really cool. They're going to be able to make their point in 5 minutes. All right, so the tradition with these things is they're 5 minutes each, and everybody claps at the end of each talk. I'm going to make 2 modifications. One, we got a little teeny bit of extra time. I'm going to make it 6 minutes, and it's a standing ovation after every talk. We're going to stand up. All right. So our first talk is Jim White's cover, Collective Intelligence Best Practices. Take it away, Jim.
I was very fortunate. Hello. I was very fortunate to start in research and development in collective intelligence back in 1974, when the head of the computer science department said nobody would ever waste the power of a computer doing electronic mail. Dr. Murray Turoff and Roxanne Heltz established the Computerized Conference and Communication Center at New Jersey Institute of Technology, where I had gone back to school after 5 years in data processing to study artificial intelligence. And Murray said, you can spend your whole life and you might build a computer program as smart as one human. But consider the possibilities if we could develop a collective intelligence. And that's been my life's quest. It turns out to be a lot harder than we thought it was. But we defined, Turoff defined collective intelligence as the ability of a group to develop better problem solutions than the best individual in the group. So we would have everyone come up with a solution to a problem, and then after the group experiment, they would say have experts judge the solutions to see which was better, whether they did better. And the overall thing was that with common principles, goals, and specialized roles and tasks, allow the emergence of a collective being when the group obeys behavioral norms, habits, processes, and structured communications sufficiently such that the group identity exhibits collective behavior that exceeds the contribution from the individual. And one of the things, the main thing takeaway from the research is that there is a higher intelligence than the human intelligence, than the individual human. And that together we can have a collective being that's greater than the self. And this is sometimes the fifth voice or ghost soprano, in a barbershop quartet or medieval music, where there's a voice heard that is not sung by any of the participants, but comes out of the combination of each one's part. Very quickly, big takeaways. Smaller teams work better reporting to larger groups. We found that if you pair people 2 by 2 and then bring the 2 by 2 together and then bring them to the larger group, there was a greater collective intelligence, collective being created. The facilitation leadership. Groups without leadership or facilitation did not reach consensus. They did not exhibit a collective intelligence, either with the group solutions. With a leader, and even with computer feedback leadership, showing them where the agreement was and where the disagreement was, the groups developed a collective intelligence. That identifying the agreement and putting opposing views together fostered these synergetic solutions, these win-win-win solutions. And John Keldon has come up with a notion, which I think is good to share with the group here, that there's only two reasons for making a decision. It's either out of fear or it's out of love. And when we make our decisions out of love, we're going to get that collective intelligence. We're going to make better decisions. We're going to find that collective intelligence. Experimentation over planning, test alternatives, objective criteria. Makes sense. Equal participation. Okay, our face-to-face groups and some other groups, we had conversation dominated by 1 or 2 people, and I know I'm guilty of it, I'm sorry. Usually male, and these groups did not exhibit collective intelligence. Now, where there was equal participation of both male and female participants, we got a greater collective intelligence. Working out loud. Making people aware of the whole process of what's going on, what everyone's doing, gives that collective being reality. Common habits, processes, delayed choice, engaging expertise, up to 5 experts. If you have more than 5 experts, you'll have a worse decision. You won't get the collective intelligence. Organic specialization, serendipity. Okay, when we have groups of people all doing little things by themselves, you get this serendipity that happens that invokes the collective intelligence. And then gamification, anonymity added to the group, improved the collective intelligence when they could say what they really felt under the guise of anonymity or a pen name. Thank you very much.
All right, great. Thank you very much. So I'm going to take hopefully even less than 6 minutes. Okay, no slides, so ignore what you see up there. I'm gonna build off of this idea and try to bring it down to some practical examples and illustrate a few examples of existing kinds of collective intelligence or games that we already are very familiar with. Okay. All right. So the first example I want to give of an existing example of a game that tends to work, and maybe some ways that it's not working, is the interactions between three parties in a system. First one is educators, or the university system, and then you have participants in that, the people who earn degrees, and then the third one are the employers that employ those participants. And how do all of these three interact together in a decentralized, autonomous organization, or what is the game and all of them are playing that is generally sustainable and works without any central point of authority or central management, okay? So you have people who need degrees in order to get a job. That's the way it works, right? Generally speaking. So the universities have to attract individuals either by reputation or by beautiful campuses or however they do that. And so they have all of these incentives built into it to try to attract individuals. So once the individuals come, they give them money, a lot of money in some cases, right, to study. And the better they do, the more opportunity they have from employers to find employment. And the employers are looking to the universities to do good work and in preparing individuals for the workforce. And that's the way each one of those participants in this game work. And see, there's an equilibrium here, and we're starting to see right now the equilibrium fall apart, which is the cost of the degree is somewhat higher than the expected return from employment. That's what's called a Nash equilibrium. So that movie, A Beautiful Mind, John Nash, he won a Nobel Prize for this work in games, right? So I want to explain, that's one game that works outside of a blockchain, but I want you to now think of yourselves as game makers, okay? So using the substrate of a verifiable system like a blockchain, you can create new games, new ways for all of us to interact to produce common outcomes, right? So for the basic example of Bitcoin, you have the same kinds of games happening. So you have validators, right, that validate transactions. They get rewarded from a base token, which all works together. So the outcome of the game is a decentralized currency. But that's not the only thing that can be done. Anything, any outcome can be designed if you think about the right inputs and outputs and the way they interact together, right? And this is not something that you can do this. That's what I want to express, right? If you think about this, sometimes you'll hear this described as crypto economics or game theory. It's sort of like an architect. We have words for this for other disciplines. An architect builds plans for buildings, right? We're starting to see, and I think it's important to realize that everyone in this room, or potentially if you want to, you can participate in these types of mechanics. And what we're trying to do with RChain and blockchains in general is give an infrastructure and certain properties so that these games can function autonomously and on their own. So by defining the rules and the interactions outside of a central planning authority, so that the central planner is software that runs on a network, that you can issue these rules out into the world, the incentives and the motivations of people you don't know, and never coordinated, never spoken with, then produce a higher level intelligence. So the way that's different from what we're seeing here, or what previously we've seen or talked about here, is those are different types of games, but they're a bit more. It starts with an individual and a person and a connection, and then builds up, and then comes back, and there's a nice feedback loop. There are other kinds of games where you don't interact at all on a personal level, right? And these would be maybe more economic types of situations. So I just wanted to kind of. That's a very quick overview of this type of system, and to be thinking about as we move forward into the realm of applications or DApps, that's what typically those things are kind of looking like. So you have some common rules, incentives, and then balance between the players that create sustainable systems. Thank you. If there are any questions, I mean, I finished within 5 minutes, so. But yeah, you got to set up here. No, yeah, you got to use a mic.
Okay. In the year 2000, I co-founded a software development company. It had an open source business model, and that worked very well for getting both clients and talent. The guys who worked for me were true open source geeks. If I had ever suggested building a proprietary product, they would have walked. And our software stack included the Python programming language. Python has an interesting governance model, which is called BDFL, Benevolent Dictator for Life. And the creator of the language was given that title by the community, and since then, it's been used in other software communities. The way it works is Guido van Rossum, a Dutch guy, he makes the final call about any decision. Now, for those of you who know it, I'm not suggesting that we use it for the co-op. I just want to extract one thing out of it. The way it works is Guido posts a question to the mailing list. That was the forum in those days, and he says, well, I think this aspect of the language was a mistake. I want to change it to A or B. What do you think? And then the chaos erupts. Everybody starts chiming in. If it's going to break code, it gets kind of heated. But it's like that slide yesterday with the hive mind. After a while, it calms down. And then Guido announces his decision. And it's done. And everybody's fine with that. It works. So why? I think the key point is everybody gets their say. We all value our opinions. We all want to put them on the table. And this system gives everybody a chance to become that bee that does a dance outside the hive and directs people off in the direction of the food. Now, our company is based in the Netherlands. We had customers all over Europe. Our software integrated with a lot of infrastructure, and we ended up collaborating with third parties. Some of them were open source, some of them were semi-open source, and some of them were proprietary. Not surprisingly, we got along really well with the open source companies. We got along okay with the proprietary companies because we always knew what they were going to do. The problem was the semi-open source. They were like ping pong balls. We never knew what to expect. Most of them were startups, and they would come out with software that had a community edition and a paid enterprise edition. And if they were lucky, a community developed around their software. And that was both an asset and a burden because the company would continue to behave like a startup. The community had nothing to say about the direction it was going, and every now and then they would make some stupid decision like changing the software license, and boom, the chaos would erupt, but it was really unhealthy chaos. And after that happened a few times, they would hire a community manager, and it was that person's job to run around and put out fires when things blew up. Now, in my experience with RChain, I've watched some decision-making happen, and I've had a déjà vu. I've been here before. But I'm not worried about it. We're young. We're working things out. We can fix it. We can do better next time. But what can we learn from the repeating pattern? Well, communities, members, they don't like surprises. Surprises create that negative, unhealthy chaos. So the 2 points that I want to put on the table today are everybody gets their say and no surprises, but I have to qualify it because it's not possible that every single person has an influence on every little decision that gets made. We never get anything done. So there is a need and a reason to break into groups and working teams and give them a mandate. So let me qualify what I just said. Everybody gets to have their say for important stuff and no big surprises, please. And here we are. We're at a governance conference. We have this rather amazing chance to shape the future decision-making of our cooperative. I'm really excited to be here and have my say, and I thank you for your attention.
Are you on the list here? Sorry, I have no idea if you're talking. So we don't have to talk about it. No, you did. We'll work in. Why don't you go after John? Tell me your name again. Tim. Okay. All right, setting up, we've got Jake Gilberg on properties of secure voting systems. Cool. Tell me when you're ready.
All right, I'm ready.
All right, take it away.
All right, hi, I'm Jake. I'm here to talk about properties of secure voting systems. Basically, my goal of this talk is to give you the vocabulary and the understanding of some of the different security properties that different voting systems have, so that when we're in a position that we need to decide to take a vote, that we are making decisions about our voting system that give us legitimacy and security. So vote privacy is the first sort of main big area of properties. Secret votes are important because without a secret vote, you open the door to coercion and intimidation to influence the vote. And even more importantly, or even more subtly, I guess, when you are conducting a vote and you don't have privacy, you may not feel free to vote your conscience because of what someone may figure out about your preferences in the future. So vote privacy falls into three main categories. The first is ballot security, meaning that this voting system is not going to reveal my preferences without my explicit sort of intention or permission. A second more sort of secure voting property is receipt freeness, which is I do not leave the poll with any information that I can use to prove to any third party how I voted. And an even stronger property, sort of more realistic of a coercer who can participate with a voter in the polls, maybe in a remote voting setting, is coercion resistance. So yeah. The second main quality of these properties, security properties, is verifiability. Verifiability may be a little unfamiliar for us because we don't really have vote verifiability for US national elections, so let me just walk through a quick scenario. Alice, on the day of an election, goes and interacts with the voting system. She receives a cryptographic encryption of her vote that cannot be decrypted by her or any other one party, and she takes that home with her. Later, she looks at a public bulletin board of all posted votes and is able to see that her vote is correctly recorded on that bulletin board. Then later, anyone can see that set of all votes and verify that they are correctly computing the result. Anyone can compute the result. So there's sort of three components to vote verifiability that make up an end-to-end verifiable system. The first is cast as intended. Alice wants to make sure that this cryptographic representation of her vote that she's receiving is actually encoding her preferences correctly. If the system allows that, it's said to be cast as intended. Another is recorded as cast if Alice can verify that her vote is in the set of all votes that's recorded as cast. And tallied as recorded from the set of all votes, the outcome can be concluded and verified. So again, all three of those together is an end-to-end verifiable system. You'll see that if you're looking at these things. There's a few other properties that don't really fit into those two categories nicely. One is eligibility verifiability. You can verify that only eligible people were able to vote. Accountability. This is if something goes wrong during the accountability process, someone recovers an error, they're able to report that to the community without actually revealing their vote. Robustness, small numbers of errors or bad actors, malformed votes do not corrupt the system, make it so that you can't output a result. Usability, you shouldn't have to be a cryptographer to use these systems. Accessibility, there are people with different abilities in sight, hearing, all these things. We would like to be able to construct a voting system that gives them the same security properties as everyone else. So here's a quick comparison of voting systems. A lot of this work has been done sort of since 2004. I've pulled most of this information from a talk, or from a book that that was written in 2016. Read the first column. Yeah. Oh, yep. So the first column is JCJ, or JCJ-like system variants. These systems are known for their coercion resistance, especially in remote settings, and they do have end-to-end verifiability properties, but they're not very robust. Those end-to-end verifiability properties sort of break down due to bad actors in the systems. There's some sort of ways to mitigate that, but that's sort of a general outline of how JCJ systems look. Helios is another popular online voting system, more usable than JCJ variants because there's a pretty well-defined user interface. It has end-to-end verifiability and a bit more usability, a bit more robustness, but really sort of falls short in coercion resistance and vote privacy. There's a button right on the Helios interface that says, "Coerce me," and you can click that and show, for example, how you could reveal your vote to anyone. And then there's like a SurveyMonkey, which is great in terms of usability and accessibility, but doesn't provide you these other sorts of security properties. So that's it, and I would like to have everyone keep in mind these properties when we're figuring out what we're going to use to vote. Thanks.
We'll now have a short message from Kit Blake.
We have some swag, and the swag is created with the new logo, which is a bit contentious. That's not surprising for a logo. But we have a white version, a white t-shirt. And for people who live on the dark side, we have a dark t-shirt in various sizes. And we also have yeah, something small. A lot of us use Zoom, and we have video conferencing, and we're concerned about privacy and spreading our image around. So we had some webcam covers made. Here they come. Some of your drinks.
to your friends.
And all shall have prizes.
How come it has felt on the top?
That's a good question.
Is that Velcro?
All right. 3, 2, 1, 0. So I'm going to talk about a possible application of RChain or blockchain more generally to an area that I haven't really heard people talking much about, which is planetary supra-resilience, which I'll explain in the course of the talk. So one of my backgrounds, one of my previous careers was working in ecological economics, developing a computational engine that would be able to calculate the economic benefits of any portion of any ecosystem anywhere in the world. And the question is, how do we value nature? And of course, many of us who have experienced nature or grown up in nature value it philosophically or spiritually. Traditional economics value nature solely in terms of the extractive value of goods. But this would be like a traditional economist looking at Ford and saying the value of Ford is solely the inventory of the lot, not the services that Ford provides to society. Ecological economics adds this notion of ecosystem services to the valuation of nature. And interestingly, most of the new economic paradigms have arisen from various crises. So microeconomics developed in the 1800s when there was a great deal of concern about the Industrial Revolution and inequality. Macroeconomics developed in the Great Depression to understand the operation of the economy as a whole. Ecological economics really developed in the 1990s when economists became very, very aware of the possibility of planetary collapse. And of course, crypto economics arose on January 4th, my birthday, during the Great Recession. And the traditional view is that the environment is a subset of the economy, but anybody that thinks about it for very long knows that really the economy is nested within the environment and fully dependent upon it. And these ecosystem services include obvious things like freshwater supply, carbon sequestration, biodiversity, that's actually a peacock in flight, recreation, and there's actually more than 20 distinct kinds of ecosystem services, and every one of these can, in some fashion, be denominated in currency terms. And there's roughly 4 distinct ways of valuing or coming up with economic values for those ecosystem services. I want to hover briefly over number 4, survey data for subjective values. A lot of these ecosystem services that we look at are really, really rough approximations in terms of valuation. So for example, the aesthetic value of an ecosystem, or the spiritual and religious values. Those are very, very, all these cultural services are kind of hard to really pin a number on, but on the left and the middle, those can actually be approximated fairly well. And one very important thing to think about is the distinction between built capital and natural capital. Built capital depreciates over time. Concrete falls apart, cars degrade, whereas natural capital, such as a forest, gains in value over time. It's a depreciating asset. And I love this picture. That is actually not far from here on Vashon Island. A young boy left his bicycle next to a sapling in World War II, and there it is. So the software system I developed was called the Ecosystem Valuation Toolkit. And this is just a really quick walk through an example where we calculated the economic benefits of an area in California that was burned by a huge fire, the Rim Fire. 400,000 square miles were burned. And we obtained the ground cover information and the habitat information from satellite and boots on the ground data. And we were able to calculate the economic benefits provided by each habitat in the original area. And so the annual benefit of the 400,000 square miles was somewhere between 210 million
and $1.5 billion per year. And then we were able to calculate roughly the amount of benefits that were lost in terms of ecosystem services to the economy, and it was roughly 50% degradation of the benefits. So what does this mean? Well, for one thing, this can affect policy. By talking to policymakers in terms of dollar-denominated figures, you can actually encourage them to make decisions that are ecologically sound. So Governor Brown applied for disaster declaration, got turned down by FEMA. We did our calculation on Governor Brown's request, and you can see on the bottom, the disaster declaration request was approved. So this fits into, again, shifting paradigms for economics and in the face of disasters. You can just look at that. It kind of makes sense. And one thing I want to change, though, in this little graphic that I obtained from the web somewhere is the word resilience. Resilience means that you have a system that bounces back to its previous state after a perturbation, which is desirable. But really, what we should be thinking about is super resilience, where if a system is perturbed, we can actually, in response, make the system go to a better place than it had been before. And these are some of the benefits of actually securitizing a cryptocurrency, for example, in terms of ecosystem services. It creates incentivization for preservation and restoration. It's an intrinsically appreciating asset. It encourages the creation and maintenance of preservationist institutions, creates novel funding mechanisms, and it's a store of existentially valuable value, which I think is really important. Oh, I'm past 6 minutes. So that's the notion of super resilience, which is a slight twist on Taleb's notion of anti-fragility. And then there's some challenges. As I mentioned, there's subjectivity to a lot of classes of ecosystem service values. There's often sparse matrices in terms of what services are provided by which ecosystems. If you have a local currency, for example, like the Earth dollar, your whole intention may be screwed up by things beyond your control, like ocean acidification and so forth. And I think that's it. Thank you.
I don't know why. Resolution. Can you just roll with it? Pardon? I make it smaller and try to. Take a 20-second experiment here and please take it back. Let it make it bigger. Sorry. Yeah. Good. Well, that's true. Fine. Quiet.
Check. Oh, right.
All right.
Next up, we got Tim Bansimer.
Yeah, that's correct.
All right, take it away.
All right. Okay, it's nice to be here. I was thinking a lot about how global governance is possible. And the reason why I thought this is because the current situation is that our global problems piling up more and more, and we are not fast enough to solve them. One reason for that is that our nation states are for nation governance and not for global governance, so they have massive problems to find global policies and to agree on top of them, and to enforce policies which will, for example, restrict some global actors from doing harm to nature or people. I think successful government is only possible with the right values and the right open processes. I think this is true for global governance, but this is also true for organization which wants to have global reach and global communities, so for RChain. So I think values are really important because they create a sense for us why we do what we do. It is really difficult to speak about values. If you want to build something like a constitution for world citizens, something which I tried with some people, and we figured out that the complexity of this topic is just way too big than that we can do something like this on our own. We figured out that it is possible to create a multidimensional approach to it, so we can have a scalable discussion about values. Because values are often words and sentences, and these words are symbols which are very, very different for all of us. So I want to give you just some prerequisites, what is required to reach global governance systems. So one prerequisite, what we need for it, is a voting infrastructure where we can collect the opinions and where we have the opportunity to propose and oppose opinions. So as you see here, what we have is we need a distributed ledger technology which gives us secure smart contracts. On top of that, we need really important self-sovereign identity systems which give us the opportunity to actually be resilient against Siblings attacks or attacks where you try to create a lot of identities to vote on a specific topic. And what we need is a protocol for secure voting. But this is just the basic. On top of that, we can start to experiment with government models, which give us the opportunity to create different decision-making processes. Why is this necessary? Because depending on the situation and depending on the question, you might want to use a different governance model. And it might be useful to have different governance models for different ethical groups or for different culture areas. For just one example there, if you want to figure out how fast a car can drive on a highway, you might ask all the people which live near the highway, and they give you back a number, for example. You can take the average and you get a really good result. If you ask them where to build a highway, and they give you back the coordinates, and you take the average, this will be total rubbish. So it's really important to keep that in mind, that depending on the question, we need other algorithms to find consensus, and we know that there are some optimized algorithms for some questions. So to give you an overview how to have scalable discussions about values, where all this governance infrastructure I showed before is required as well to have this discussion. I think we have that values on top, like sustainability, and then we go one level below and we explain why this is important and how we came up with that definition of that value. And on the third layer, we can have the community discussion where we debate about all the different aspects and how we live these values. Another representation of this is with the example democracy. Democracy, I just read it out, democracy is a decision-making process that is actively executed by each related human on local and global levels respectively. It's decentrally organized and lead to a decision, which is voted by a majority with equally valid votes. I mean, this is just one description of democracy. It's the definition we came up with. There are a lot of different definitions about democracy. But what does it mean exactly? How to execute these values, how to cultivate such a value. If we want to have an engaging community, we need to find ways how we can cultivate these values. So the second level would be then the explanations why we can up with this definition and examples how you can implement it in your daily life. And the third level would be the discussions about the explanations and how you can implement it. Just another representation of that implementation. It shows that there is, like on the highest level, where the definitions of the values are, there is low transactions, so there is not a lot of activity, they are relatively stable. And if you go lower in the levels, you have more activities and more engagements. So this means the higher values can change, but they are rare to change. But on the lower scale levels, we can synchronize together what are our values. And we can exchange our understanding how we perceive a specific value and how we want to live them. And then we can actually develop our culture out of that, how we actually cultivate all these values. Because, for example, Saudi Arabia is a country where human rights are not really respected from my perspective, but they have them written out really, really nicely. it doesn't help anyone to write out anything really, really nicely. So I hope we can find a way to cultivate these values we find for us, and maybe we find also an exercise where we can gather some values, what your top 3 values are, for example, so we can make a similar exercise we did before today. Thank you. Sure.
That might not be on.
There we go. So on your slides, you showed a bunch of stuff about democracy, which we appreciate as being part of democratic nations. That said, you know, Kit brought up the benevolent dictator for life. The co-op itself is not a democracy. It's set up as the members advising the board what their will is, and then the board executing on that. What kinds of organizations of government do we want to have as part of the co-op? I think that's something we need to decide. Is there going to be a discussion group about that?
And even if, for example, if we have not a democratic infrastructure for the co-op itself, we might want to have a democratic infrastructure for the community to propose ideas. You know, this is like just optimizing like swarm intelligence input. You know, you need to have a way how you can speak up and how your voices be heard. And the only way how you can do that is in some democratic fashion, right? So that's the point why I brought up democracy here. So you don't need that in every structure, and you don't need that in any structure you don't need it in a co-op, but you want to have a feedback system how to gather that swarm intelligence, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I think your question sort of goes beyond his talk in a way. Yes. Yeah, so people, you know, think about ways to answer his question. Hi, I'm Dan Conley. And I'm going to tell you about, okay, I've got an idea toward a trust metric for authority in the RChain bounty system. Okay, so the RChain bounty system, it's a success disaster. I'm well familiar with these things in the web community. So we've got this guy building VM primitives. We didn't ask for it, he just showed up, this is great. We got somebody building an IntelliJ plugin for Rolang. We didn't ask for this, it's great. 6 graduate students from China are translating the architecture document. Just showed up, it's great. We got a bunch of people covering all the social media channels, and they worked out some channel etiquette and guidelines and stuff like that. Pretty good. There's some other stuff that's not so good. I'm not going to go into it really. Okay, so Greg mentioned a new approach to authority. So kind of some people discovered the system and maybe you can game the system and stuff like that. And if you just kind of leave these things alone, the bad actors can sort of drive away the good and stuff. So I started thinking about that. And I remembered this community called Advogado that was this open source software developer blog website, basically. And it was a research project by this guy, Ralph Levine, and he came up with this trust metric, and the goal was to accept as many valid accounts as possible while also reducing the impact of attackers. All right, and it's based on this network flow algorithm. You know, it's about 200 lines of Python. It's got a Wikipedia page about it for all the math nerds. And there's a security proof that shows that, you know, given that a limited number of people get confused about who the bad actors are, then the bad actors really never get any influence. And there's a little bit of debate about exactly what the theorem proves and stuff. But it's pretty interesting. It actually worked in practice in my experience. There's a whole bunch of people that got to sign up for this thing. You know, there was anybody could sign up, and the bad actors, the spammers and stuff like that were largely not a problem. Okay, and the way it actually works is, so there's a network, and the arcs in the network are represented by peer certifications. So Joe English says that I'm a master, and Gerald says that I'm a journeyer, and Aaron Schwartz, rest in peace,
certified me as journeyer. And the system crunches away on this metric, and out comes, turned out to be a master certified open source software developer, which kind of surprised me at the time. Hadn't really run a large open source software project before, but whatever. So there was a little bit of grade inflation there, maybe. Okay. And so later at the Web Consortium, people started putting certified W3C web developer on their resume, and there was no such thing. so we thought, hey, well, maybe we could make such a thing. And so I thought, hey, let me take this Advogato trust metric and see if we could have web developers point at each other and say, that guy's a pretty good web developer, that guy's a pretty good web developer. And maybe we could come up with certificates that way. And so as I was thinking about it in April 2010, I made this simulator, and we will now see if the demo gods are smiling on us. Okay, so this is it starts with a seed, and the seed points to a few people that are good. And then at each step in the algorithm, it sort of chooses at some probability whether it's going to be a bad actor. And there's a probability that people are confused about whether the guy's good or not, and you can sort of see the evolution of the algorithm of the network as it progresses. And you notice that the red nodes pretty much stay at the outside, and you keep flipping through, and they're still at the outside, and so the guys at the outside really never get much influence on what's going on. So it's kind of cool. Oops. Oh, this is in case the network gods were not smiling. So I want to try that out in the bounty system, and that is my idea. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, it's open source, of course, right? It's open source.
Next up.
Just fork it.
So, we got two that have got Jim White's cover. Do you want to do the other half of yours?
Yeah. Isn't there someone before me? No?
No, this is your turn. There's two more.
Is it on GitHub or just But do you have GitHub now?
Whew. So this came up kind of a surprise here. It'll take me a second to bring up the slides. What? It's giving me a hard time here. Oh. Okay. Let me just bring up I have the backup PDF. Yeah.
Are you ready?
All right.
All right, take it away, Jim.
I guess we can see them. So the in Digital Life Collective, okay, we wanted a self-organizing organization, and we went through all processes of defining our values and looking at different governance systems and models. And then Joachim Straw came out with we started developing this social ledger tool, which is still evolving quite a bit. The initial prototype to help us organize better. And we wanted to have our tool work in the flow of the discussion. And so we added a / command, which currently runs in Mattermost. Ideally, eventually it'll run in any communication environment with the Social Ledger 2.0, and a bunch of commands that let people set for a team in the channel their goals, their norms, their tasks or actions, their documents and links, and collectively build a group memory of the activities in the task, in the thing, and then be able to act on those, where each we have, whoops, let's go here where, you know, we can map the connections between the people, and this is the chaos over on the right, and we can see how strongly people are connected together, but we don't know what's happening in the collective. And then over here, we have a team in a channel where we have the generic roles of guide and scribe, actors, and then links, which from sociocracy is connecting related circles or teams so that they're each represented in one another and they consent to each other's actions. And by engineering links of stakeholders properly, we could build an organization that had no hierarchy, really, but still could act with a collective intelligence or collective being and could scale. And here we can look in one channel, we can see the activity, the norms, the goals, the actions, documents, links, okay, and within that channel, we see who's involved, who's engaged in what activities. And the specific role of a person is determined by which activities they're engaged in. So they make their own role by engaging in activities, or they're assigned. The software is agnostic to what the norms are in terms of who can do what. The software doesn't, everybody's king. Anybody can type any command and cause any change in the structure, and then, you know, if someone says, wait a minute, they can change, you know, whatever, it can be changed, but it is consensus by default. If you do something and it's accepted, you're empowered to do it. And then, you know, then that team is within a domain, which is in a cooperative, and that cooperative is in the domain where we have HoloChain, DigLife, in the social ledger trial, DexStack, and a number of other organizations where we're hoping to get facilitators to help us run this trial and help these communities self-organize, which is the common goal, to build a system that's not hierarchical. And then there's the dashboard, which lets you access the capabilities of the social ledger and sort and filter your actions, documents, links, goals, norms, jobs, and contracts across organizations or within organizations. And you know, we're supporting setting up these linked channels for autonomous organization, which is built on sociocracy or holacracy, which comes from the Quaker egalitarian principles, which have existed for a long time, and this is a successful process that works, and self-management, where decisions are delegated to individuals, and the structure of the organization is made by peer-to-peer contracts. And so those are the two paradigms that are enabled in this social ledger structure. Thank you.
I'm actually going to go again, too. Mic check, thank you. There were only 2 rules. 5 minutes and everybody claps. There was no rule about you can't go twice. Timer. Party. Okay, RChain Life. All right, so my friend Pete. My friend Pete was driving his son to school, and his son says, "Hey, Dad, you know what Bitcoin is?" My friend Pete says, "Yeah." And his son says, "Can we mine some?" And my friend Pete says, "Well, let's do a little reading, son." So Pete asked me what they should read, and I wasn't really sure. And somehow this idea of the game of life came into my mind. And so I started thinking about what would a game of RChain life be like, where you could play a game and learn how the whole thing works. Okay. Okay, so you roll the 2 dice, and one of the rules is, for example, you got to learn to do the remainder. So you roll the 2 dice, and if it's 10, 4 goes into 10 2 times with 2 left over, so that's modular arithmetic, and then add 1, so you move ahead 3 spaces. You can learn a couple things like this while you're playing. Nice. All right. At the beginning of your turn, you can choose to mine instead of moving forward, and this, you shake the dice really hard for 10 seconds and roll them, and you do this 3 times, and if you get doubles all 3 times, you get a Bitcoin of reward. Otherwise, you get nothing. Okay, and it's a replicated ledger. Anytime anybody gains or loses any coins in the game, everybody has to write it down. So if there's a lot of people playing, this can be a pain in the tuchus. All right, and then cryptography 101. The Bitcoin address is a public half of a key pair. If you land on this space, you lost or forgot one of your private keys, and so you lose half your Bitcoin. The other side is your sister saw your private key, and so she took half your Bitcoin. Okay, and now you start selling comics. You draw comics and sell them in the Bitcoin marketplace. All right, so you're earning two Bitcoin per turn. By the way, the object of the game is to use distributed applications at several scales. So the selling comic books is at 1 scale, but we also want to do it for the baseball team, schedules and photo sharing, fantasy football league, maybe chores and allowance in your family, and maybe a charity for disaster victims in a faraway land. So that's the object of the game, is actually to get connected at different levels. Okay, so you're selling these comic books, and you receive a purchase transaction, so you ship a comic book. Unfortunately, the buyer already spent those Bitcoins, and now no one will accept the Bitcoins from you, so you lose a Bitcoin. Next time, wait for more transaction confirmations. All right, now you're waiting for transaction confirmations, and now your online customers are pissed off because they got to wait between paying and seeing the actual comic. Lose half your customers. All right, so then you can, payments is one thing, but a bunch of people thought about it hard and thought about this smart contract thing where you could do organizational design. And in 2016, a whole bunch of people put $117 million into there in 1 week. So you roll a couple dice to see to what extent you get into this, and you change some of your Bitcoin into Ethereum and then get into this. All right. And then we learn about governance. Okay, a month later, somebody studied the code very carefully and discovered that if they sent it just the right transactions at just the right time, it would send them a lot of tokens, $50 million or something.
lose 2 turns while the community figures out whether to stick with code as law or pretend that those transactions didn't happen. All right, and then CryptoKitties comes along. It's this game where you can trade virtual cats, and it's very popular. And here we learned that the Ethereum virtual machine is distributed, but it's single-threaded. It's like the whole world is sharing one computer, and everybody has to wait in line to run their programs. Lose 2 turns while you wait for your transactions to clear. Okay, so RChain comes along. After studying Bitcoin and Ethereum, some folks looked at the situation and said, I think we can do better. So the RChain contracts are written in Rolang, which is internally concurrent, not single-threaded, so the CryptoKitties thing is a lot less likely to happen. And it facilitates automatic formal verification. So the computer studies the code for you and rules out large classes of bugs, for example, the DAO hack. And each instance of RoVM executes an independent set of smart contracts, so there's no interaction between your fantasy football league and the stock market, so these computers don't, different computers can run each one. You can learn about caps per proof of stake at the beginning of your turn. You can choose how many of your Rev tokens you want to devote to validating, and for every 5 tokens you devote to validating, you get 1 reward to help secure the network. And that's kind of as far as I've gotten in teaching 12-year-olds.
Wow. Hey.
All right. Who knows how to tell us about lunch?
Okay, I do.
All right.
So, great morning, very inspiring. We're trying to model for you. MatrixWorks was really involved with you yesterday. We're still here, but we're not in the foreground, we're in the background. But we have some, I think, an important role to play as a support for what's happening. And so the first thing I'd like to let you know, and I think that how an organization does beginnings, middles, and endings is important. So we're losing a couple of our MatrixWorks facilitation team. Heidi has already gone. We didn't get to say goodbye to her, but would you stand up, please, and let's wave to her. Yeah, stand up and wave. Good journeys to Heidi. Safe travels, Heidi. She really was quite impressed with all of you. And I think somebody offered her a job, yes? So we're blending our worlds. And Alex, would you stand, Alex? Alex has to also go back to Boulder. So say goodbye to her. You actually get to thank her. Yeah? Yeah. So to fill these vacancies, I have recruited 2 people from your community. And I would ask them to join me. One is Ian, and the other is Ed. So, when you want to have mutual influence, you do things like this, yeah? And they're going to help us figure out how to make MatrixWorks a co-op. So, the story goes on. So was there anything else? Yeah, they're a part of our team, and we hope to use our facilitation team this afternoon in both the breakout rooms and the sharing back to the whole community from the breakout. You want to say anything why you joined this team?
Well, Makar, you asked me to, and that helped. Yeah, and Makar and I have done work together before, so we've appreciated each other in that previous setting, and I'm delighted to serve.
Yeah, I was also invited and participated a couple years ago. Makar was helping us with some work, and so I wanted to jump in the opportunity to also learn how this process works myself. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So I think the last thing that I would like to say is that as you continue to develop, when you want to finish this work these few days with a governance process, and we're hanging out and going to continue to raise the flag for how you do this in a very human way. And that the more neuroscience lets us know how important relationship is to high performance, I think you'll begin to see why Greg would invite his mother to come and participate. So thank you so much, and enjoy your lunch. Come back or go into breakout rooms. Yeah? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and you will have more games when we reconvene, I think. Okay, that's it.